Welcome to Jazz Talk. My name is Steve Williams, and to my left is the host of a podcast called JazzNewEngland.com, and his name is Gordon Forman. Welcome to the program.
Good to be on. Good to talk to you.
So we met, I think, at Shan's restaurant to see
That's right.
Greg Abate, the saxophonist.
His new live disc release.
That's right.
They had a few copies anyway. So.
That's right, yeah. So how long have you been doing this podcast?
I started with the podcast, actually the Jazz New England podcast started about a year and a half ago. The first, I got it together for the 2014 Newport Jazz Festival. I talked to, I have a radio show on WRIU. Jazz Explorer, that's on Tuesday mornings. 8 to 10 on Tuesday mornings.
Yeah. URI.
Yeah. And because we have a booth at the New England Jazz Festival, the Newport Jazz Festival, I ended up talking, she asked if anyone wanted to do any interviews, and I said I can do interviews and I can offer you to do podcasts. I know a podcast, the interview too, because I've done that for other places I work, and I had another podcast that I ran for a while too. So actually the first guest on my Jazz New England podcast was George Wein.
Oh yeah, so, the founder of the Newport Jazz Festival.
And that was, actually it's still one of the, although it was about a year and a half ago, I still have a lot of hits on the website for that one. Yeah. And I had followed it up with Mappa Elliott of Mostly Other People Do the Killing, and I can't remember. There was it just kept happening. I try and do one every other week.
Oh yeah.
But
that's great.
They don't. The logistics of lining people up often
can be a little difficult.
They tend to bunch up, and like I'll have someone every week, and then go a month without anybody.
Right. Yeah. Even though you don't require them to go to a studio to do the interview, it's just a phone type of thing, or through your laptop.
I have, I do it through my laptop, and I have a rating system of how the quality of the recording is going to be.
Right.
And probably the lowest, I try not to do telephone interviews because the quality is low.
Yes.
And there's no visual cues.
You
can't see the person.
Right.
And they're often distracted. I've had some very good ones too.
Oh yeah.
But it's to me it's the most difficult, and the sound quality. I've actually had people call into the radio and say, "Oh, he sounds terrible."
Yeah. Right.
So I try and avoid those, and most of them I do on Skype actually.
Yeah.
Because I have a little program. I'm not going to name it on the air, but there's a program I have that records Skype very well, and it breaks down the two sides of the conversation separately. And the sound quality for Skype is actually pretty good.
Good.
So I use that most of the time, and they can be anywhere in the world. And I've actually recorded a couple of interviews from Europe where I have to keep track of the time zones, and it's 5 or 6 hours difference.
That's right.
And and then I actually do some live interviews. I have on the radio show, Jazz Explorer. I occasionally have guests in the studio, local people mostly.
Yes.
Although I have had Phil Haynes, who happened to be, I've interviewed him 3 times now on the show, and he was coming up this summer. I'd interviewed him twice, and he said, "I'm going to be up in New England. I'll be on your radio show." And I was like, "Fine, that'd be great."
Let's talk about a recent one you did with Greg Abate.
Yes.
This was, now you did a few of them, but this one was for the double CD release that was done at Shan's Restaurant last year. And how did that go? Like, this was before Phil Woods even died.
That's right.
He had pneumonia at the time, I believe.
Yes, when I interviewed Greg Abate, he was still talking, Phil has not been doing well. He's ill because I guess he said he had a pneumonia, and he is actually talking in the podcast about, I hope he does well and can recover.
Right.
In time for the performance.
Right.
And then it went, well, I don't think he's going to make the performance because he's not really well. We've kind of written that off. And then I saw in the news media several days after that he had died.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was and I guess they had to reprint the posters for the show.
That's right. And it was a big loss to the jazz community because he was a player that's been on the scene since the early 50s. So he's a major figure. He played with Quincy Jones's band in the 50s and stuff. Played with Clark Terry and Doc Severinsen.
Yeah.
Some very big names.
He was best known for bop, but he actually played in Europe for a while during the 60s and early 70s.
That's right.
And played with a lot of the more avant-garde players while he was over there.
That's right. Yeah.
And, it was funny because the day before he died on a Wednesday, and of course my show was on a Tuesday morning.
Right.
And I had just by coincidence put together a show, with some Greg Abate and some Phil Woods, and I played a whole set of Phil Woods. Actually, I think about 3 songs, maybe not a whole set.
Right.
But and I was very happy that I had the chance to do that.
Right.
On his last day alive, that I had actually instead of trying to do it afterward.
Right. And it had to have been a really gratifying thing for Greg. I'm sure you talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Playing with Phil for the last 4 years.
Yeah. Well, intermittently, yes.
Intermittently,
he had actually,
off and on.
I guess he had played with him. I'm trying to think. The Deerhead Inn. He was talking about playing at the Deerhead Inn, which the only reason I'd ever heard of it was that the Keith Jarrett album that was recorded there. Yeah. And I heard it was a small place, and I didn't realize it was that small a place. And I was talking to Greg, and he said, "Oh yeah." I said, "How?" He said, "It's tiny." And I said, "How tiny?" He said, "It's real tiny." And he said, "Yeah, about 50 people." And I was like,
right.
"Oh, no."
Yeah. And they did a record with a California label back in 2012 in Pennsylvania, him and Phil, prior to this one with Whaling City.
Right. I didn't know they recorded that in Pennsylvania.
It was in Pennsylvania, yeah.
I've actually played, I don't own the album, but I've played some of it on my show.
Oh, yeah.
And digitally, I don't see the album cover, and I just Phil Woods, and Greg Abate, great, and it's 2012.
That's
and sometimes the wonder of the digital medium, sometimes the finer things get lost.
That's right.
And I have to say I'm of the age where I remember the big 12-inch album covers.
Oh yeah.
And even the CDs provide a certain amount of information, but in the digital it's so easy to just lose all that background of what you're listening to.
I'm sure Greg probably related you some stories about Phil being with him and stuff, and how that, it's not really maybe the things he talked about musically, but more personal stuff. And I'm sure Greg learned more on the stage than he did with discussing things.
Yeah, I think from, not that I know him well, but I've interviewed him several times and have talked to him, with the recorder off a little. And I think he's articulate, but he's a very musical person, and he becomes another person when he's playing music. Maybe he's the same person, but it seems like he's more focused to that than the verbal.
That's right.
And so I'm sure he gained a lot from Phil Woods on an intuitive level, on a more spontaneous level.
And the thing about Phil Woods is that most people know him for the song he played with Billy Joel, "Just the Way You Are," back in like 1970.
Which I didn't even know he'd done until after he died. They were talking. I said, "Oh, he did that."
He actually won a Grammy Award for the saxophone solo on that recording.
Yes. Yeah.
So most people know him that way, but not through the decades of playing jazz.
Well, I have been a jazz fan since the mid to late 70s.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Hartford, and at that time there were a lot of free concerts, Bushnell Park.
Oh yeah.
And other places. It was free, and I went to a lot of them, not because I was a jazz fan, but because they were free.
Right.
As a teenager or my early adulthood.
Oh yeah.
And going to enough free jazz concerts, I started to like it.
Right. Exactly.
And so, yeah, I started listening to it and realized that I've been seeing a lot of the top name acts in the country.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, I saw Bill Evans shortly before he died. The pianist Bill Evans, not to be confused
not
with
the saxophonist.
Yes,
right.
and I was probably
Sure,
18.
you've seen Jackie McLean there? 'Cause he lived in the Hartford area.
I probably have. A lot of those I still haven't figured out who I am. Since I started, I've been a fan, and I've known jazz. But when I started doing the radio show, and it's particularly interviews, I dig into people now, especially if I think there's a chance I might get an interview, because I have followed. Today, I got up very early this morning and started listening to some Jack DeJohnette.
Oh yeah, who's going to be a featured guest on your show?
He will be.
future?
I will be interviewing him a week from. Actually, on Monday, a week from today, and he'll be featuring the. Talk to him in the afternoon and edit the interview overnight and have it on my program Tuesday morning. Probably on my website within a week.
Yeah.
But what I did is I listened to his music.
Yeah.
I have one of those big encyclopedias of jazz, and I went and I read up on him a little bit. And it's kind of frustrating because it tells you what they think are his best albums and doesn't say anything else about anything.
Right, exactly.
And I've seen him several times, but I didn't really know a lot of his background.
Right.
And I saw him in Newport this summer with his Made in Chicago group.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't and I've seen him play, and I knew he played piano some.
He did. Yeah.
But I gather he considers it a major part of his oeuvre, what he does now.
Yeah.
And he has studied, and I was watching some things on YouTube today where he's playing some piano, and he's very practiced and well.
Right.
It's like, how can you be phenomenal at two things?
He is.
I know.
He is.
But yeah, and when I discover an artist, I tend to go to the URI archive, and the URI, not URI libraries, but the Ocean State libraries, take out everything I can find on the artist, and start, because I feel if I'm going to do an interview with them, I don't want to, hey, what did you do?
Exactly.
I want to have a little background, because I pride myself on being asking a little. A lot of these guys go, and they go into a media market, and they get in. Someone down the radio station talks to them who doesn't necessarily know. Some of them are very good. Some of them don't know a whole lot, and they just repeat what they read off of the guy's bio.
Right.
And I try and go a little deeper.
Yeah.
And I like to try and develop my podcast with a little bit of archival quality, some with evergreen quality, where people, and I do a lot of. I follow through the wonders of the internet. I can see where people are when they download my podcast. I'm on iTunes also. That's Jazz New England on iTunes, and I see which ones they do, and most of them have a long tail. The first few days they have a pretty good numbers, several hundred downloads, and some of them have had several thousand downloads.
That's good.
And then they taper off, and some of them have a lot of. I was saying George Wein. He's one that I can always count on. I look at it and it's like, yeah, he's still getting hits. After a year and a half now.
Yep.
And Greg Abadi is one of them too that I keep getting hits. I have had 3 podcasts featuring him in interviews. And
now this DeJohnette one will be an interesting interview, because for some interviewers they'll feel, those who don't do a good job and say looking up Jack's background will automatically gravitate towards the trio with Keith Jarrett and kind of go in that direction.
Right.
Mostly.
Yes.
Where you'll take a different tact than that.
Right. one of the things that I've emphasized on, the radio show is, and here's my big plug for WRIU, because I think it's a great station.
Right.
And every day you tune in, there's 10 different DJs.
Yep.
And it's one of the few stations, I think it might be the only station with daily jazz in Rhode Island. But there's, every DJ there has their own taste in music.
Oh, yeah.
They present a program that,
That's right.
and I know most of them. And the ones I don't know, I kind of know about. And I know they all put a lot of time investigating music, searching out new music, finding things that are interesting in there.
Right.
And that's what I do. I build a taste, yes, it's my taste, but, together with the others, it's a pretty rounded taste.
Yeah, right. I knew Jack DeJohnette played the piano, but my extent of him is just my experience with the recording he did. I think it was probably '89 or so, Parallel Realities, that was his project, but Pat Metheny was on it, and you could tell just listening to it, it was a real, Pat really had some sway in that recording.
Yes, I know of the recording. I have listened to it, but it's been a long time since I've listened to that one. I have to say this.
Right.
The one I really like is the one he did with Bill Frisell about
guitar player.
9 years ago, and it was The Elephant Sleeps But Still Remembers, and he plays some piano on there with Bill Frisell on guitar.
So it was basically a duo with some overdubs on
That's exactly.
piano.
I guess it was, from what I read in the liner notes, which is, it was a live concert that they went back in and did some overdubs and remixing, editing, and made it into one of the things that's good about jazz and is that when you record it live, there's always a level of spontaneity.
That's right.
And to attain that level of spontaneity, you're going to have some rough edges. And if you want, and most of the time I say leave them in.
Right.
But because I'm a big fan. Studio production has a big place, and I think if it's done well, some of it's done well and some of it's not.
Right.
But I'm a big fan of doing it straight in these live production
So
things.
that would
but I think that was a very well done.
So was kind of considered kind of like on the out, they would call it, not necessarily avant-garde, but on the out, the type of music that they did.
On that album? Or?
Yeah, but for that,
I would say yes and no.
somewhat of a...
Yeah. I think he covers a lot of ground. I know he's done albums with
well-versed.
I can't remember, and watch me get this, an African musician, was it Fode Sousa, who's I haven't heard the album, I saw it listed when his discography. It's like, he's done a straight African, he's done a straight meditation record.
Oh yeah.
And he's done, of course, he played with Miles Davis in the 1960s. And he's his first solo albums were funk albums, you know. And
well, back in the time, that's what you did.
Yeah, and
70s.
But it was interesting, as I was saying, when I saw him play with Made in Chicago, you would never guess he was a pianist because there was, he had didn't play any piano at all.
Well, I knew of him playing piano was Marian McParlin, who's a piano player herself, did a show for NPR, and they put these out through Concord. They became CDs, so she did with a bunch of folks, Dave Brubeck, Benny Carter, and Lionel Hampton, and Jack was one of them, and it listed him playing piano on it, so that's how I knew that he played piano.
And of course and
plus he played with Keith Jarrett all those years, so that kind of affects.
And I believe, and my memory may be rusty, but there's one on Ruth and Dadia, an album with Jack DeJohnette. It's a duo album. I think it's under both their names.
Right.
From the early 70s.
Yeah.
And there's actually one piece where he is playing piano, and Keith Jarrett is playing saxophone, which is
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they took chances back in those times. Yeah, they did that. Yeah.
So
what other artists have you big name artists have you done the podcast with?
With Leo Smith.
Oh yeah.
I have. He's. What was it? I think he was nominated for the Pulitzer. I don't know if he won it for his. And I'm gonna get the name wrong. The name of the album. 10 Years, and I don't know the name of it, but I think he's an amazing musician. He's, I think they're calling it new creative music, where it has a lot of affinities with classical music. He writes, although he will deny it, I think he writes some themed pieces, although in my interview with him he says it's not themed, it is what it is, and he talks about writing in different languages, but he's working with an orchestra. He's talking about using just-intoned instruments, so it's all not in a key, but all just-intoned and worked. To tell you the truth, a lot of it shot over my head when he was talking about it, exactly the theory.
Right.
But he's also, he's just released a new album, which I just heard this morning for the first time, and it's duets with a bassist, and it's just straight improvise. Some of it's improvised and some of it's not, but trumpet and. So who else? And
I can
I'm
tell
having
you,
a block.
one of my favorite ones was we did a remote back in 2007. We went to Scullers and we did an interview with Harvey S., who the opening music that you heard.
Yes.
With him and his trio, so that was a lot of fun. It was a half-hour interview. In fact, we talked even a half hour after that. So in the place, he played with Stan Getz and all those guys, Toots Thielman.
Oh, he's good, yes.
He goes all over the world. He travels the world, plays acoustic and electric bass, does Latin music. He's even done a recent thing, Plunky Strings is his new one that he did with a guitar player, Cheryl, I forget her last name, but they put it out through Whaling City just recently.
I'm really not familiar with, like I say, I'm always discovering new things.
Of course.
And I've heard his name, and I know I've heard him mentioned in several different contexts, but
artist formerly known as Harvey Swartz, but now he goes as Harvey S. So he's played with James Moody and Patico di Rivera and all those great artists. So do you get out to a lot of clubs and try to line up interviews? Is that how you do that? Or
no,
go
I actually
through agents?
don't. I usually, being on the radio, we have listings.
Right.
And a lot of times the way to get an interview successfully, because is to look at the listing, see who's coming around, get in touch with their people. Right. Oh, you're that's how I got the Jack DeJohnette.
Yeah.
Because I saw, he's playing up at Berkeley early December.
Oh, okay.
So I talked to, and the thing is, I'm getting enough of a track record now.
Yeah.
With and I've actually interviewed, did several interviews before I even had the podcast that I just ran on the radio, and I put them up on Soundwave.
Sure.
I did Jay Beckenstein and Mary
from Spyro Gyra.
Yeah, and who was and Mary Halverson, who was a guitarist.
Oh yeah.
And so at any rate, sometimes that will work. That where I'm, you see who's traveling and touring in the area, and I like to keep it New England, jazz New England.
Exactly.
And the other one is you actually start to talk to people who know other people.
Yeah.
And I did John Arabagan. I don't know if you're familiar with his. He's a tenor. He plays a lot of different saxophones. It's mostly tenor and alto, but he just did a solo sopranino album too, which is pretty wonderful. And he plays with mostly other people do the killing. He plays with Mary Halverson.
Okay.
So I talked to Mappa Elliott, who is the bassist and writes the music for mostly other people do the killing, is his brainchild.
Oh yeah.
But he plays with knows Mary Halverson also. So I got that one because I had done an interview with her.
Right.
I got an interview with John because I did an interview with him.
Right.
And
now, some of the New England people, do you have interviewed Joe Potenza or
yes.
Dan Moretti, guys like that?
Yeah, Joe Potenza is actually, I like Joe.
Yep.
And he actually called me up and was talking to me about something I was playing on the radio. And we yacked a while, and I said, why don't you just come on the show? And so he was a wonderful guest on the radio show.
He was on this show.
And I still have a recording of it, and I do not have it on the podcast site. And my sincerest apologies, Joe.
Right.
It will get up there, or maybe I should just have him on again, because I would like to do that. Yeah, he was a very, because he plays with everybody.
He does.
And, with his gig there, his weekly gig.
At Aspire.
At Aspire.
On Fridays.
He has, and Dan Moretti is playing with him this week.
Yep,
And
that's right.
I don't get out as often as I would like. I would like to, we'll be trying to make it to that one. We'll see if it works.
Right, exactly.
But, and Dan Moretti, I've interviewed him.
Yep.
Actually, surprisingly, and I don't know why, because I know he's nationally known, but I think he is my most downloads of any podcast that I've done.
Really?
Yes, I did him about a year ago.
Yeah.
October, I think, last year. And I was getting a lot more traffic at that time for some reason. It just goes in a certain amount of popularity of who you have, but sometimes it just goes in cycles, and you're like, why?
That's right. He's been there teaching at Berkeley since 1996, so
Yes.
I'm sure you talked about some of the stuff
Yeah.
that he tries to impart on students, I'm sure, things like that, or just his recording career as well.
We talked about recording, and at that we talked about he talked about traveling in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I had sometimes I like to do different things, and I think I had a list of people that he played with.
Yeah.
And over his career, and started dropping names. And what do you think?
Amazing.
Give me a little sketch of this person. And I know one was David Liebman,
Oh, yeah.
who he had
recorded with.
Yeah, with that
Latin Genesis.
Yes,
Yeah.
and one of them was Hal Crook.
Oh, yeah.
A Rhode Island
Right.
arranger,
Rhode Island
and I think he also teaches as
At Berkeley as well. Yeah.
who also played with, and tell me if I'm wrong.
Phil Woods?
Yes.
Yeah.
He did the arranging and the trombone on a bunch of early 90s, late 80s albums with him.
Yeah, we got about 1 minute left, so it was a
really?
pleasure having you on, Gordon.
Yes. Good.
You do a podcast called jazznewengland.com.
jazznewengland.com.
And you're on the radio, WRIU, at URI.
Yes.
Jazz Explorer is the program.
90.3 FM, streaming at WRIU.
8 to 10 on Tuesdays.
8 to 10 tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning, there will be a basketball game, I have been told. So I will have a short show tomorrow. Yeah, I'll be doing...
So will that be people calling in, or will you have a scheduled guest for that?
I don't have anyone on tomorrow. I will be playing...
Just recordings?
Yes. And the week after that, I have Jack DeJeanette will be on, recorded, of course.
Oh, good.
And I have Kamasai Washington. I don't have a date on that yet. I was going to